The fluorescent lights of St. Mercy Hospital flickered overhead, casting a sterile glow across the linoleum floors as chaos erupted in every direction. Nurses darted between rooms, their sneakers squeaking against the tiles, while doctors barked orders over the incessant beeping of machines. Amid the whirlwind stood Emily Harper, a 28-year-old nurse with chestnut hair pulled into a messy bun, her hazel eyes sharp with focus despite the exhaustion tugging at her limbs. She'd barely clocked in, her coffee still warm in her hand, when the emergency doors slammed open with a force that made her heart lurch. Paramedics stormed in, their voices cutting through the clamor like a siren. Male, mid-30s, multiple gunshot wounds, chest and abdomen, BP's crashing. "We need a trauma team now," they shouted, wheeling a stretcher at breakneck speed. Emily's breath hitched as she caught sight of the man sprawled across it, his white shirt a crimson mess, his face ghostly pale, his chest rising and falling in shallow, desperate gasps. Blood pooled beneath him, dripping onto the floor, a stark red trail marking his arrival. She didn't know his name, didn't know his story, but she knew one thing: he was dying. The ER shifted into overdrive, a symphony of controlled panic. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears as she stepped forward, her instincts kicking in. She'd seen gunshot wounds before, too many times in this city, but something about this felt different. The air thickened with tension, a silent current passing between the staff as they exchanged quick, wary glances. She reached for a pair of gloves, her hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins, when a voice sliced through the room like a guillotine. "No police clearance. You're ready to wishes on a one. No treatment." It was Dr. Richard Vance, the hospital's steely-eyed manager, his arms crossed over his pristine white coat, his tone as cold as the metal instruments lining the trays. Emily froze, her fingers hovering over the gloves. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the erratic beeping of the heart monitor. She turned to him, disbelief flooding her chest. "He's dying. Dur debacher, Benti, Cabrin. We can't just, rules are rules." "Harper, he snapped, his expression unreadable. A wall of bureaucratic indifference. "No clearance. No resources." "Step back." The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in as Emily's gaze darted around. The other nurses averted their eyes, some shuffling backward, others staring at the floor as if it might swallow them whole. The doctors hesitated, their hands hovering over equipment they wouldn't dare touch. No one moved. No one challenged him. The beeping grew more frantic, a countdown to a life slipping away. Emily's chest tightened, her breath uneven as she looked back at the man. His name tag read James, his eyes half open, pleading silently for someone, anyone, to care. Blood seeped through the gurney's edges, staining her scrubs as she stood there, torn between the oath she'd taken and the job she needed. Her hands trembled, her mind racing. She could hear her mother's voice in her head, the woman who'd raised her alone after her father walked out. "You don't get to play hero, Emily. You keep your head down and survive." But then she saw James's chest stutter, a weak shudder that told her he had minutes, maybe seconds, left to him. "Enough," she muttered under her breath, her voice shaking but resolute. She grabbed the gloves, snapped them on, and yanked a tray of supplies toward her. A hush fell over the ER, the kind of silence that feels louder than chaos. Emily's hands moved with precision, securing an airway, applying pressure to the gaping wounds, stitching with a focus that drowned out the world. The sharp tang of antiseptic stung her nose, mingling with the metallic scent of blood. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. A nurse, Clara, her friend, stepped forward, wide-eyed. "Emily, Asurito, you can't." "I have to," she hissed, not looking up, her fingers threading the needle through James's skin. The monitor's beep steadied, just slightly, a fragile thread of hope. She could feel Vance's presence behind her, his heavy breathing a storm cloud ready to break. But she didn't stop. Minutes stretched into eternity until, finally, the numbers on the screen stabilized. James was alive. Relief crashed over her like a wave, her shoulders sagging as she stepped back, her hands stained red. The room was still, the rhythmic beep of the monitor the only sound, until a slow, deliberate clap shattered it. Emily turned, her stomach dropping as she met Vance's icy stare. "Well done, Damanani can once. Harper is Harper. Stidity, he said, his voice dripping with venom. You saved him, but you're done here. The words hit her like a punch, knocking the air from her lungs. What? She breathed, her throat tightening. You're fired, he said simply, turning on his heel and walking away. The sterile walls seemed to close in, the faces of her colleagues blurring as they avoided her gaze. No one spoke. No one defended her. Her fingers curled into fists, nails digging into her palms. But she forced herself to stand tall. If this was the price of saving a life, she'd pay it. She ripped off her hospital badge, the plastic clattering against the counter, and stormed out, her heart a war drum in her chest, her future a gaping void. The city streets swallowed her as she wandered, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement. Emily's scrubs were wrinkled, stained with James's blood, a grim reminder of the morning's chaos. She felt hollow, unmordo. Wicked beressers, turn. Her fingers brushing against the hospital ID still tucked in her pocket, the only piece of her old life she hadn't left behind. She wasn't sure why she kept it. Maybe it was a lifeline, a tether to who she'd been just hours ago. Now, woo. Kurnasaritzer. She was nothing. The weight of betrayal pressed down on her, sharp and unrelenting. She'd given everything to that hospital. Sleepless nights, skipped meals, tears shed in the break room. And they discarded her like trash. Her steps slowed as she reached Lincoln Park. The laughter of children and the rustle of leaves a stark contrast to the storm inside her. She sank onto a bench, her head in her hands, when a sudden gasp jolted her upright. A small crowd had gathered near a tree, their faces etched with panic. Emily pushed through, her nurse's instincts flaring despite everything. An older man, 60s, maybe 70s, with silver hair and a tailored suit, lay crumpled on the grass, his hands clutching his chest, his breath shallow and ragged. Someone call 911. She shouted, dropping to her knees beside him, her fingers pressed against his neck, no pulse. Cardiac arrest one and then our certain surony. Time slowed, the world fading to just her and him. She laced her hands together, placed them on his chest, and began compressions, the rhythm steady despite the ache spreading through her arms. One turnicum, two, happy turn, 3, 4. She counted under her breath, her voice a lifeline. The crowd murmured, a woman sobbing nearby, but Emily blocked it out. Come on, she whispered, leaning in to give 2 rescue breaths. His chest rose, fell, and she went back to compressions. Seconds stretched into forever until, finally, a shuddering gasp broke through. His eyes fluttered open, his breathing ragged but there. He was alive. Emily sat back, her pulse racing, adrenaline still coursing through her. The crowd exhaled as one, whispers of awe rippling around her. Sir, can you hear me? She asked, her voice soft as she touched his shoulder. He nodded weakly, his eyes meeting hers with a flicker of gratitude. A man in a sleek black suit knelt beside her, his face pale with relief. Miss Sonom. You saved his life, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I'm his assistant, please. Your contact info. Mr. Grayson might need to reach you. Emily hesitated, her mind too foggy to process the name Grayson. She pulled the hospital ID from her pocket, handing it over with shaky fingers. Here, she said simply, standing as paramedics arrived. She didn't linger, didn't need the attention. With one last glance at the man she'd saved, she turned and walked away, the weight of the day clinging to her like damp clothes. Back in her cramped apartment, Emily collapsed onto the couch, the peeling ceiling staring back at her. The dim light from a flickering lamp cast shadows across the walls. The hum of her ancient fridge the only sound. She hugged a pillow to her chest, her mind replaying the day. James's blood on her hands, Vance's cold dismissal, the stranger in the park. She'd lost her job, her security, everything, for doing what she believed was right. Would anyone hire her now? A nurse who defied protocol? Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Too drained to move. Then a low rumble broke the silence, a deep, steady hum growing louder outside. Frowning, she crossed to the window and pulled back the curtain. Her breath caught. 10 gleaming black luxury cars lined her street, their polished surfaces reflecting the streetlights like mirrors. Her neighbor's curtains twitched, curious eyes peering out. Her heart thudded against her ribs. Who were they? What did they want? A firm knock on her door made her jump, her hand hovering over the knob. Another knock, calm, confident, swallowing hard. She opened it. There stood the man from the park, Mr. Grayson, tall and imposing in a tailored suit, his silver hair catching the light. The color had returned to his face, his presence radiating quiet power. Behind him, his assistant held a thick envelope. "Emily Harper," he said, his voice smooth, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "We need to talk." Her mouth went dry, her mind scrambling. "Mr. Grayson, Wanasunanrun," she managed, stepping aside as he entered, his assistant following. The contrast was jarring, his polished shoes against her scuffed floorboards, his suit against her thrift store furniture. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He turned to her, his gaze serious. "I don't take chances with the people who saved my life," he said, nodding to his assistant, who handed her the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, pulling out a check, $500. Her knees buckled. I can't take this," she stammered, her eyes darting to his. "You can, and you will," he replied, his tone firm but kind. Tears pricked her eyes, the dam breaking as she sank onto the couch, sobbing, raw, messy sobs that shook her whole body. Grayson watched silently, letting her feel it all. Before he left, he handed her a black card with gold lettering. "Dinner tomorrow. Nas tomorrow. Siridi one's hornarfin. A car will pick you up." She nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. And then he was gone, leaving her with $500,000 and 1,000 questions. The next evening, a sleek car whisked her through the city, the golden glow of streetlights blurring past. She stepped out in front of a towering glass building, a restaurant that looked more like a cathedral of wealth. Inside, chandeliers glittered, soft music hummed, and the air smelled of truffles and wine. Grayson waited in a private corner, the city skyline sprawling beyond the windows. "Right on time." He said, smiling as she sat, her simple dress feeling inadequate against his tailored elegance. "I almost didn't come," she admitted, her voice steady despite her nerves. He chuckled, raising his glass. "I wouldn't have blamed you. Over appetizers too delicate to touch." He leaned forward. "What drives you, Emily? What do you want most?" She frowned, caught off guard. "I just want to help people," she said, her throat tightening. "That's why I became a nurse." He nodded, his gaze piercing. "And yet you risked everything for a stranger, twice." She swallowed, the memory of James's blood and Grayson's collapse flashing through her. "I couldn't watch them die." He smiled faintly. "That's why you're here. I own a network of private hospitals. I've been searching for someone with your fire. Someone who acts, not just follows rules." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I want you to lead a new initiative," he said, his voice low and certain. "Fully funded. Your vision. No red tape, just medicine." Her mind reeled. "You're offering me a hospital. A purpose?" "Dumpursurant," he corrected. "To do what you do best, without limits." She stared at him, the weight of it sinking in. Yesterday, she'd lost everything. Now, Imanwanto, she could change everything. "What do you say?" "Kanwane did this min," he asked, watching her. She took a breath, her decision forming like a spark catching flame. "I'm in." Months later, Emily stood before the Emily Harper Health Initiative, a sleek, modern hospital gleaming in the morning sun. The plaque read, "Healing without barriers." Her chest swelled with pride and disbelief. She'd started as a nurse fired for caring too much. Now, she'd built a place where no one would be turned away. Inside, the air was warm, alive with purpose. Doctors listened. Nurses smiled. Patients breathed easier. Grayson appeared beside her, his voice quiet. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" She nodded, tears brimming, "More than I ever dreamed." He smirked. "I knew you were the right choice the moment you fought for a stranger." She met his gaze, smiling. "I didn't do it for this." "I know," he said. "That's why you're here." As she stepped into her office, her stethoscope waiting, she felt it. Losing everything had been the first step to gaining more than she'd ever imagined. Emily Harper stood in the doorway of her new office, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of the stethoscope resting on her desk. The faint hum of the hospital buzzed around her, nurses calling out vitals, the soft shuffle of footsteps, the distant ding of an elevator. It was a symphony of life, one she'd spent years orchestrating in the shadows of St. Mercy's rigid walls. Now doing. It was hers to conduct. She stepped inside, the glass door whispering shut behind her, and let her gaze sweep over the space. The desk was sleek, modern, a stack of medical journals neatly arranged beside a laptop that gleamed under the soft light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond the glass, the city skyline stretched out, a patchwork of steel and glass bathed in the golden hues of dawn. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with something bigger, something that felt like purpose clawing its way to the surface. She'd done this. She'd built this. Her hands still trembled slightly as she picked up the stethoscope, the weight of it grounding her. It wasn't just a tool, it was a promise, a lifeline she'd clung to through every sleepless night. Every patient she'd fought for, every time she'd been told no, she looped it around her neck, the rubber cool against her skin, and sank into the chair behind the desk. The leather creaked under her weight, a sound that felt oddly final, like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. For a moment, she just sat there, letting the silence settle, her mind drifting back to the day that had changed everything. James's blood on her hands, the cold echo of Vance's voice, the park where she'd knelt in the grass, pumping life back into a stranger. She'd lost her job, her stability, her sense of self, all for doing what she knew was right. And yet, it should win. Here she was, not just surviving, but thriving. A knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts. Mesuum, Harper Minabundermasumon. A young nurse, Lila, her name tag read, peeked in, her dark curls bouncing as she shifted nervously. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a patient in room 3, possible pneumonia, but the family's uninsured. At St. Mercy, they'd have been turned away already. What do we do? Emily's lips curved into a small, determined smile, the kind that felt like a spark igniting. We treat them, she said simply, rising from her chair. No questions, no paperwork. Get a chest x-ray and start oxygen if his sats are low. I'll be there in 5. Lila's eyes widened, a flicker of awe passing through them before she nodded and darted off. Emily's heart thudded with a quiet thrill. This was it, the reason she'd said yes to Grayson, the reason she'd poured every ounce of herself into this place. No one would be left to die because of a policy here, not on her watch. She stepped into the hallway, the hospital alive around her. The walls were painted a soft blue, not the harsh white of St. Mercy, and sunlight spilled through skylights, warming the air. Doctors moved with purpose, not fear, their voices steady as they consulted with patients. In one room, a young girl giggled as a nurse, Clara. Her old friend from St. Mercy blew up a glove into a balloon, her mother's tired face softening with a smile. In another, an elderly woman clutched a doctor's hand, her eyes bright with trust as he explained her treatment. Emily's throat tightened, a lump forming she couldn't quite swallow. This was what medicine was supposed to be, not a battlefield of bureaucracy, but a sanctuary of care. She reached room 3, pushing the door open to find a middle-aged man propped up in bed, his breathing labored, his wife wringing her hands beside him. You're the doctor, the woman asked, her voice trembling with hope and doubt. Nurse, Emily corrected gently, offering a reassuring smile. But I'm here to help. Let's get him breathing easier. Okay, she worked quickly, her hands steady as she listened to his lungs, the rattle of fluid confirming Lila's suspicion. Pneumonia, she said, glancing at the wife. We'll start antibiotics and fluids. He's going to be fine. The woman's eyes filled with tears, her hands clasping Emily's. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. They wouldn't even look at him across town. Emily squeezed her hand, a quiet fire burning in her chest. You don't have to thank me. This is what we do here. As she stepped out, leaving Lila to finish the setup, she caught sight of Grayson leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, a faint smirk playing on his lips. You're a natural at this, he said, his voice low and warm. She shrugged, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'm just doing my job, he chuckled, pushing off the wall to walk beside her. No, Emily, you're rewriting the rules of the game. They strolled through the hospital together, the rhythm of it pulsing around them. I meant what I said that night, Grayson continued, his tone shifting to something more serious. I've seen too many people in this field, doctors, administrators, nurses, who'd rather save their own skin than a patient's life. You're different. You don't hesitate. Emily's steps slowed, her gaze dropping to the floor. I hesitated plenty that day with James, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I almost didn't act. Grayson stopped, or turning to face her, his gray eyes sharp but kind. But you did us, or does you earn? That's what matters. Doubt doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And it's why this place works. She met his gaze, a flicker of gratitude warming her chest. I couldn't have done it without you, she said, meaning it. He waved a hand dismissively. The money that's just a tool. You're the heart of this, Emily. They reached the reception area, where a small crowd had gathered, reporters, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Emily froze, her stomach twisting. What's this sort of she asked, her voice tight. Grayson's smirk returned. Words out. The Emily Harper Health Initiative's making waves, free care. No barriers. They want the story. She shook her head, panic rising. I'm not a spokesperson. I'm a nurse. You're more than that now. He said, nudging her forward. Go on. Tell them why this matters. Her pulse raced, her palms clammy as she stepped into the spotlight. The questions came fast. How does it work? Who's funding it? What's your goal? And she stumbled at first, her voice shaky. But then she thought of James, of the man in room 3, of every patient she'd ever fought for. This isn't about me, she said, her voice steadying. It's about making sure no one dies because they can't pay or because some rule says we can't help. That's all. The cameras clicked. The reporters scribbled, and Grayson gave her a nod of approval as she stepped back, her cheeks flushed but her head high. Later that night, Emily sat alone in her apartment, the check for $500. Zero still untouched on her coffee table. The city hummed outside, a distant chorus of horns and laughter. But inside, it was quiet. She'd moved past the shock of the money. $500,000 was a fortune she'd never dreamed of. But it wasn't what kept her awake. It was the hospital, the lives she could save, the chance to build something lasting. She leaned back, her eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling, and let herself imagine it. A network of clinics, maybe reaching beyond the city, a place where nurses like her, people who cared too much, could thrive. Her phone buzzed, Grayson's name lighting up the screen. Saw you on the news. His voice crackled through. You're a star? She laughed. A tired, genuine sound. I just want to keep going. You will, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. This is just the beginning. The next morning, Emily arrived at the hospital before dawn, the sky still bruised with night. She walked the halls, her stethoscope a familiar weight around her neck, and felt the shift in herself. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a force. A voice, a hand reaching out to pull others up. In room 3, the man with pneumonia smiled weakly as she checked his chart, his wife asleep in the chair beside him. You're a miracle, he rasped. She shook her head, smiling. No, I'm just here. As she stepped out, the first rays of sunlight spilled through the windows, painting the walls gold. She'd lost everything once. Her job, her security, her place in the world. But in that loss, she'd found something greater. This hospital, this mission, this life. And she'd never let it go. The days blurred into weeks, then months, as Emily Harper settled into her new reality at the Emily Harper Health Initiative. The hospital became her second skin, its walls as familiar as the lines on her palms. She woke before the sun each morning, the city still cloaked in shadow as she slipped into her scrubs. New ones now, crisp and white, embroidered with her initials in navy thread. The drive to work was quiet, the streets empty save for the occasional delivery truck or night shift worker trudging home. She'd roll down her window, letting the cool air bite at her cheeks, and breathe in the stillness. It was her ritual, a moment to brace herself for the storm of lives she'd hold in her hands each day. By the time she arrived, the parking lot was already speckled with cars. Nurses, doctors, volunteers, all drawn to this place she'd built from the ashes of her old life. She'd park, grab her coffee, black, no sugar, and step into the chaos she'd come to love. The hospital thrived in a way Saint Mercy never had. There were no clipped conversations about insurance denials. No patient shuffled out the door with half-hearted apologies. Instead, the air buzzed with purpose. Laughter from a child's room. The soft murmur of a doctor explaining a diagnosis. The steady beep of monitors signaling lives being saved. Emily moved through it all like a thread weaving a tapestry, her presence steady but unobtrusive. She'd check charts, adjust IVs, sit with families whose eyes brimmed with fear or relief. Her hands, once trembling with doubt, now moved with a quiet confidence, each motion a testament to the years she'd spent fighting for this. But it wasn't just the work that fueled her. It was the people. Lily Wantrosation, the curly-haired nurse, had become her right hand, her quick wit cutting through the tension of long shifts. Clara Montsequinua, her old friend from St. Mercy, brought a warmth that softened the edges of their hardest days. And then there was Grayson, a constant shadow in the background, his sharp eyes watching her progress with a mix of pride and calculation. One crisp October morning, Emily stood in the break room, stirring her coffee as the first snowflakes of the season dusted the windows. The TV hummed in the corner, a local news anchor's voice droning on about the weather until it shifted to a familiar story. The Emily Harper Health Initiative continues to make headlines, offering free care to thousands in its first 6 months. Founder Emily Harper, once a nurse fired for defying protocol, has become a symbol of hope in a broken system. Emily froze, the spoon clattering against the mug. Her face flashed on the screen, a still from that chaotic press conference. Her hazel eyes wide but resolute. She hadn't watched it then, too rattled by the cameras, but now she saw herself as they did. A woman who'd turned loss into something unstoppable. Lila burst in, her grin wide. "You're famous," says Susimantiri. "Boss. They're calling you the nurse who said no." Why, Emily groaned, heat creeping up her neck. "I didn't say no, I just did what I had to." Lila laughed, nudging her shoulder. "Yeah, Tunum, you took me now, Kanon, and now you're a legend. Own it." The attention unnerved her, a spotlight she hadn't asked for. Letters poured in, some from patients she'd saved, others from strangers who saw her as a beacon. "You gave my son a chance when no one else would." Honor. One read, the handwriting shaky but heartfelt. "I wish every hospital was like yours." Secretary Surdiwar said another. She kept them in a drawer in her office, a quiet reminder of why she kept going. But with the praise came scrutiny. Blogs dissected her past, digging into her firing from St. Mercy, speculating about Grayson's involvement. Who's the mystery man bankrolling her empire? One headline blared. Emily ignored it, but the whispers followed her through the halls, in the grocery store, even on the rare nights she met Clara for drinks. "They think I'm some kind of saint," she muttered over a beer one evening, her fingers tracing the rim of the glass. Clara smirked. "Or a rebel. Either way, you're shaking things up." That's what scares them. Grayson didn't help the rumors. He dropped by unannounced, his sleek black car pulling up like a thunderclap, drawing stares from staff and patients alike. That afternoon, he found her in the ICU, checking on a teenage boy who'd come in with a collapsed lung. The boy, Tommy, grinned weakly as she adjusted his oxygen mask, his mother hovering nearby. "You're tougher than you look," Emily teased, earning a faint laugh. She stepped out, scribbling notes. When Grayson's voice cut through, "You're a miracle worker. Harper." She glanced up, wiping her hands on her scrubs. "Just doing my job." He tilted his head, his silver hair catching the light. "No, you're building something bigger than a job. I got a call from D.C. this morning. Senators want to tour this place. They're talking policy reform." Her stomach flipped, a mix of excitement and dread. "Weber sir for key reform. Based on this," he nodded, his smirk faint but real. "You're a threat to the status quo." They're nervous, and they should be. The idea lodged in her chest like a stone, heavy and unyielding. She'd never set out to change the world, just to save the people in front of her. But as the hospital grew, so did its reach. A second clinic opened across town, then a mobile unit for rural areas. Volunteers flooded in, med students, retired doctors, even a few St. Mercy defectors who'd whispered apologies as they signed on. Emily hired them all, her team swelling into a small army of believers. She'd walk the halls at night, the quiet hum of the building wrapping around her like a blanket, and feel the weight of it, every bed filled, every life touched. Every rule she'd broken to get here. It was exhilarating and terrifying. What if it fell apart? What if she couldn't keep up? The doubts crept in during the small hours. When the adrenaline faded and the silence pressed too close, she'd sit in her office, the city lights glittering beyond the glass, and wonder if she was enough. One evening, as snow blanketed the city, Emily stayed late, poring over budget reports, the numbers blurred, her eyes burning. When a knock startled her, Tommy's mother stood in the doorway, her coat dusted with flakes, a paper bag in her hands. "I saw the light on," she said shyly. "Brought you some cookies," Tommy insisted. "He's home now, thanks to you." Emily blinked, caught off guard, then smiled. "You didn't have to." "Yes, we did, seriously, Morns," the woman interrupted, her voice firm. "You're the reason he's alive." She set the bag on the desk and left, leaving Emily staring at the crumpled paper, a lump in her throat. She opened it, chocolate chip, still warm, and took a bite, the sweetness cutting through the exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, she let herself cry. Not from sadness, but from the raw, messy truth of it all. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was mattering. The next day, Grayson called her to his office downtown, a glass tower that dwarfed her hospital. She arrived in her scrubs, feeling small against the marble floors and polished suits. But he waved her in like she belonged. "We've got a problem," he said, tossing a folder across his desk. She opened it, legal documents. "A lawsuit from St. Mercy? They're claiming you stole proprietary methods," he explained, his tone dry. "It's nonsense, but they're scared. Your model's cutting into their profits." Emily's stomach sank, anger flaring hot and fast. "They fired me for saving a life. And now this." He leaned back, his gaze steady. "They're desperate. We'll fight it. My lawyers are on it. But this is bigger than them now. You're a target because you're winning." She clenched the folder, her knuckles white. "I didn't start this to win anything." "I know. Sure you're one to worry," he said, his voice softening. "But you are, and I'm damn proud of you." The lawsuit hung over her like a storm cloud, but Emily refused to flinch. She doubled down, spending days with her team, nights with patients. Her resolve a steel thread running through it all. The hospital didn't just survive, it soared. News crews camped outside. Senators toured the wards. And the letters kept coming. One night, as she locked her office, a shadow moved in the hall. Clara, holding 2 coffees. "Thought you'd need this," she said, handing one over. They sat on a bench outside, the snow crunching underfoot, and watched the city glow. "You ever think about stopping?" Clara asked, her voice quiet. Emily sipped her coffee, the warmth seeping into her bones. "Not once," she said, and meant it. She'd lost everything to get here, her old life, her fears, her limits, and in its place, she'd found a fight worth having. The storm could come, she'd weather it. Winter tightened its grip on the city, the snow piling high against the windows of the Emily Harper Health Initiative. But inside, the hospital burned with a relentless energy. Emily moved through the days like a woman possessed, her scrubs a second skin, her stethoscope a constant companion. The lawsuit from St. Mercy loomed like a dark cloud, its legal jargon a tangle of threats she barely understood. But Grayson's assurance, "We'll bury them," kept her steady. She trusted him, not just because of his money or his power, but because he'd seen something in her that day in the park, something she was only now beginning to recognize herself. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a leader, a fighter, a spark that had ignited a movement. And she'd be damned if she let St. Mercy snuff it out. The hospital hummed with life, its halls a kaleidoscope of stories. In room 12, a single mother clutched her toddler's hand as Emily adjusted an IV, the child's fever finally breaking after days of worry. "I don't know how to repay you, Wanyo," the woman whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. Emily smiled, brushing it off. "You don't have to. Just take care of her." In the next wing, an elderly man, Mr. Carter, grinned as she checked his chart. His hip replacement a success. "You're a tough one. Kid Barrow one or not," he rasped, his eyes twinkling. "Remind me of my daughter." She laughed, the sound light despite the weight on her shoulders. "I'll take that as a compliment." Everywhere she turned, there were faces, tired, hopeful, alive, each one a brick in the foundation she'd built. It wasn't perfect, the hours were brutal, the budget tight, the pressure relentless. But it was hers, and it worked. The staff felt it too. Lila had taken to calling her captain, a teasing nickname that stuck, while Clara became her unofficial confidant, her steady presence a balm on the roughest days. New hires poured in, doctors who'd grown sick of corporate medicine, nurses who'd heard whispers of a place where they could actually help. One afternoon, a wiry man in his 40s approached her in the break room, his scrubs still creased from the store. "I'm Dr. Patel, Sarashamadamashinan," he said, extending a hand. "Left St. Mercy last week. Couldn't stand the politics anymore. Heard you're doing things different." Emily shook his hand, her grip firm. "We are. Welcome aboard." He nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. And she felt it again, that quiet thrill of knowing she wasn't alone in this fight. But the fight was growing. The news wouldn't let up. Cameras flashing every time she stepped outside. Headlines painting her as both savior and troublemaker. The nurse who defied the system became the rebel reshaping healthcare. And with each story, the stakes climbed higher. Grayson's prediction came true in late January, when a sleek black SUV rolled up, disgorging a trio of suits, senators, their aides trailing like shadows. Emily met them in the lobby, her stomach a knot of nerves, her scrubs wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. "Ms. Harper," the lead senator, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper smile, said, extending a hand. "Senator Claire Reynolds. Ichurna Surindonwan. We've heard a lot about you." Emily shook it, her palms clammy. "Good things, Sorna de Berfarni. I hope." Reynolds chuckled, but there was an edge to it. "Good for some furndom. Never masumain. Disruptive for others. Mind giving us the tour?" She led them through the hospital, her voice steady as she explained the model. "No insurance checks, no turnaways, just care." They nodded, scribbled notes, asked pointed questions about funding and scalability. In the ICU, they watched her adjust a ventilator for a construction worker who'd fallen 3 stories, his wife weeping quietly nearby. This man would have died waiting for approval elsewhere, Emily said, her tone matter of fact. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Impressive. But sustainable." Emily met her gaze, unflinching. "It has to be. People's lives don't wait for balance sheets." The senator didn't reply, but the look in her eyes, calculating, intrigued, stayed with Emily long after they left. Grayson called that night, his voice crackling with excitement. They're rattled. "Harper, you've got their attention. Next step's a hearing. D.C. wants you to testify." Her heart sank. "Testify? I'm not a politician." "No, he said. "You're better. You're real." The idea of a hearing gnawed at her. A beast she couldn't tame. She'd faced down Vance, saved lives with her bare hands. But standing before a room of lawmakers felt like stepping into a lion's den. She buried herself in work to escape it, her days stretching into nights, her apartment a pit stop for showers and snatched hours of sleep. One evening, as she reviewed patient files in her office, Clara slipped in, her arms crossed. "You're killing yourself." "I am weaponator," she said, her voice soft but firm. Emily didn't look up, her pen scratching across the page. "I'm fine." "You're not," Clara shot back, pulling the file away. "You're a ghost, pale, jumpy, barely eating. This place needs you alive, not a martyr." Emily's jaw tightened, her eyes stinging. "I can't stop." "Clara, way we is sobre your irony. If I do, it all falls apart." Clara knelt beside her, her hand on Emily's arm. "It won't. You've built something strong. Let us carry some of it." The words cracked, something open, and Emily let out a shaky breath, nodding as tears slipped free. The hearing came faster than she'd expected. She flew to D with one of this. "See?" With Grayson? The plane's hum a dull roar against her racing thoughts. The Capitol loomed like a fortress, its marble halls echoing with power she didn't understand. She wore a simple blazer over her scrubs. Grayson's idea, a nod to her roots, and clutched her notes. Her palms sweaty. The chamber was packed. Senators in crisp suits. Cameras rolling. The air thick with expectation. Senator Reynolds called her forward, her voice crisp. "Ms. Harper, tell us why your model matters." Emily stepped to the podium, her legs trembling, and took a breath. "I'm not here to talk numbers or politics," she began, her voice wobbling before it steadied. I'm here because I've seen people die, not from disease, but from rules. A man bled out in my ER because he didn't have clearance. A mother lost her son because she couldn't pay. I started my hospital because that's not medicine. It's a machine that chews people up. We don't ask for money or permission. We save lives. That's it. The room was silent, her words hanging like smoke. Then questions flew: cost, ethics, feasibility, and she answered, raw and unpolished, her voice rising with every memory of Saint Mercy's cold indifference. She left the stand drained, her hands shaking as Grayson met her in the hall. You were a force. She the tunny. What an anonym, he said, his grin wide. They didn't know what hit them. She managed a weak smile, her chest tight. Did it matter? He nodded, his eyes serious. More than, back home. The fallout was immediate. Clips of her testimony went viral. The nurse who took on Washington, and donations flooded in. Enough to fund a third clinic. Sector, Nuri Marnum. Mercy's lawsuit faltered, their case crumbling under public pressure. And Grayson's lawyers delivered the killing blow. They're done, he told her over the phone, his voice triumphant. You won. She sank onto her couch, the check still untouched beside her, and let the words sink in. Winning didn't feel like victory, it felt like a beginning. Spring arrived, the snow melting into rivers that reflected the hospital's glass facade. Emily stood on its roof one morning, the wind tugging at her hair, and looked out at the city she'd changed. The initiative was a network now, 4 clinics, a training program, insurance in reconnecting, a voice in a fight she hadn't meant to start. She'd lost her old life, her quiet anonymity, but gained something vast, a legacy of care, a proof that one choice could ripple forever. Grayson joined her, his suit impeccable as always. Proud of you, Harper. He said, his voice low. She smiled, the sun warm on her face. Couldn't have done it without you, he shrugged. Maybe, but this is one fun. This is you. They stood in silence, the city alive below, and Emily felt it, peace, purposum, means a fire that wouldn't fade. She'd keep fighting. It's who she was. The sun climbed higher over the city, its rays glinting off the rooftop of the Emily Harper Health Initiative, casting long shadows that danced across the concrete. Emily leaned against the railing, her hands gripping the cool metal, the wind whipping strands of chestnut hair across her face. She closed her eyes, letting the breeze carry away the last traces of exhaustion that clung to her like a stubborn fog. Beside her, Grayson stood with his hands in his pockets, his silver hair ruffling slightly, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm of her thoughts. The hospital below thrummed with life, 4 clinics now, a network stretching beyond the city's edges, a dream she'd never dared to dream until it was real. She'd come so far from that frantic day in St. Mercy's ER, from the blood on her hands and the badge she'd left behind. Yet the weight of it all pressed against her chest, not a burden, but a responsibility she'd chosen to carry. You ever think about where this could go? Grayson asked, his voice cutting through the wind, low and deliberate. She opened her eyes, glancing at him. His gray gaze was fixed on the horizon, but she knew he was watching her, measuring her reaction. What do you mean? She replied, her tone cautious, though a spark of curiosity flickered inside her. He turned to her, his smirk faint but familiar. You've got 4 clinics, a training program, a national spotlight. See, talking about pilot programs based on your model. This isn't just a hospital anymore. Emily, it's a revolution. So, where do you take it next? Her stomach twisted, a mix of excitement and vertigo. She'd never thought in terms of next. She'd been too busy surviving the now, fighting lawsuits, saving lives, proving she could do this. But his words planted a seed, one that took root in the quiet spaces of her mind. I don't know, she admitted, her voice soft but honest. I started this to help people, not to, I don't know, change the world. Grayson chuckled, the sound warm against the chill. Too late for that. You already have. She looked away, her gaze settling on the city sprawl, towers of glass and steel, neighborhoods tucked in their shadows, lives unfolding in every corner. The idea of more, of clinics in other cities, of a system that didn't just patch holes but rebuilt the whole damn thing, felt too big, too distant. And yet, it stirred something in her, a restless energy she hadn't felt since that first day she'd defied Vance. Maybe, she said finally, her lips curving into a small smile. But I'd need help. A lot of it, he nodded, his eyes glinting with something like pride. You've got it. Say the word, and we'll make it happen. The conversation lingered with her as she descended from the roof, the hospital swallowing her back into its rhythm. She moved through the halls, her sneakers silent against the tiles, her stethoscope swaying with each step. In the pediatric wing, she paused to check on a girl, Sophia, 6 years old, all pigtails and gap-toothed grins, whose asthma had landed her here overnight. You're my favorite nurse, Sophia whispered, clutching a crayon drawing of a heart with Emily's name scrawled inside. Emily's chest tightened, a warmth spreading through her she couldn't name. You're my favorite artist, she teased, tucking the drawing into her pocket. Sophia's mother, a wiry woman with tired eyes, caught her arm as she turned to leave. You don't know what this place means to us, she said, her voice raw. We'd be lost without it. Emily squeezed her hand, her throat tight. You're not lost anymore. The moment stayed with her, a quiet fuel as the days rolled on. Spring gave way to summer, the city baking under a relentless sun, and the initiative grew with it. The training program churned out its first graduates, nurses and medics who'd learned not just skills but a mindset, a refusal to let red tape dictate who lived or died. Emily watched them at the ceremony, a small crowd in the hospital courtyard, their faces bright with purpose. She spoke briefly, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. You're not just healers, you're fighters. Don't forget that. They cheered, Commander Dewan, a sound that echoed off the glass walls. And she felt it again. That spark, that seed Grayson had planted, growing into something she couldn't ignore. The lawsuit from St. Mercy was dead, buried under a mountain of public support and Grayson's legal muscle. But new battles loomed. Competitors, big hospital chains with deep pockets, started circling. Their ads slick with promises they didn't keep. Their lobbyists whispering in D, Sombriturn, Surinturn, is ears. Emily saw it on the news. Read it in the letters from patients who'd been burned by their games. They raised my copay again. One wrote. The paper creased with frustration. I can't afford to breathe, let alone get sick. She pinned it to her office wall, a reminder of why she couldn't stop. Grayson called her one muggy July night, his voice crackling through the line. Anam. They're scared. Harper, your numbers are eating into their profits. They'll push back hard. She leaned against her desk, the fan whirring in the corner. Let them try, she said, her tone steel. We're not going anywhere. The pushback came fast. A smear campaign hit the tabloids, Harper's free clinics. Too good to be true. Followed by audits from state regulators, their clipboards bristling with suspicion. Emily spent days with lawyers, nights with her team, her sleep whittled to scraps. She'd pace her office, the city lights a blur beyond the glass, and fight the doubt clawing at her edges. Was she in over her head? Could she really take on giants? One morning, as she downed her third coffee, Lila burst in, her face flushed. You need to see this. She dragged Emily to the lobby, where a crowd had gathered, patients, staff, even strangers holding signs. Save Harper's dream. Healthcare for Warnont. A man in a worn jacket stepped forward, his voice rough. They're saying you're a fraud. We know you're not. We're here for you. Emily's eyes burned, her voice catching as she thanked them. The sight, hundreds strong, unasked, unwavering, lit a fire in her she hadn't known she'd lost. She fought back with everything she had. Press conferences, raw and unscripted. Her scrubs a badge of authenticity. They want you to think we're failing. She told the cameras, her voice steady. Look at our patients. They're alive. That's not failure. Donations spiked. Volunteers swelled. And the audits found nothing. Just a system that worked too well to discredit. Grayson grinned over dinner one night, his wine glass raised. You're a bulldog. Harper Basura. They didn't stand a chance. She laughed, the sound tired but real. I had to be too much at stake. He nodded, his gaze softening. You're not just saving lives anymore. You're rewriting the rules. Ready for the next round. Her pulse quickened, that seed blooming wild. Yeah, Silman one, she said, meeting his eyes. Einer Sertishowen. Fall painted the city in reds and golds, and Emily stood before a new clinic, her fifth, its ribbon fluttering in the breeze. The crowd cheered as she cut it. Sophia from the asthma ward beside her, scissors oversized in her tiny hands. "You did it," Sophia whispered, beaming. Emily knelt, hugging her tight. "Wisid de reyur." "We did it." Later, alone on the clinic's roof, she watched the sunset, the skyline a canvas of possibility. She'd lost her old life, her quiet corner of the world, but gained a fight that stretched beyond her wildest dreams. Clinics in Chicago, then Boston, maybe L. I year, Tistornancio, a data work of care, a middle finger to the machine that had spit her out. Her phone buzzed. Grayson. A text. See, is drafting a bill? Your name's on it. She smiled, the wind cool against her skin. She'd keep going, not for fame or power, but for the Sophias, the Carters, the faces she'd never forget. This was her life now, a revolution she'd never meant to start, but one she'd finish, no matter the cost. The autumn leaves swirled around the base of the new clinic, their fiery hues a stark contrast to the sleek glass and steel of the building Emily had just christened. She stood on the rooftop, her breath fogging in the crisp air, the city sprawling below her like a living, breathing thing. Chamanas Torrentin, the cheers from the ribbon cutting still echoed in her ears. Sophia's giggle, the roar of the crowd, the flash of cameras capturing a moment she'd never imagined living. Her hands gripped the railing, knuckles whitening as the weight of it all settled into her bones. 5 clinics now, a network that pulsed with purpose. A bill in D, C, U, with her name whispered in its margins. She'd lost her old self somewhere along the way. The quiet nurse who kept her head down, who dreamed small, but the woman who'd taken her place was someone fiercer, someone forged in the fire of choices she'd never regretted. The wind tugged at her scrubs, the embroidered E, on the chest, a quiet badge of everything she'd become. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from the reverie. Grayson's name flashed across the screen, his text short and sharp. "Meet me downtown. Big news." She frowned, a flicker of unease curling in her gut. His cryptic messages were nothing new. He loved the drama of a reveal, but something in the timing felt urgent. She texted back a quick, "On my way," grabbed her jacket, and headed for the stairs. The hospital's hum fading behind her as she stepped into the evening chill. The drive was a blur, the city lights streaking past like comets, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it the bill? A new threat, another clinic. By the time she pulled up to Grayson's tower, a monolith of glass that pierced the skyline, her pulse was a steady drumbeat, her nerves electric with anticipation. He was waiting in his office. The room a cathedral of wealth, marble floors, leather chairs, a view that swallowed the city whole. He stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the twilight, a glass of scotch in his hand. "You're late," he said without turning, his voice teasing but edged with something heavier. Emily dropped her bag on a chair, her tone dry. "Traffic's a nightmare." "What's the big news?" He turned then, his gray eyes glinting, and slid a folder across his desk. "Take a look." She opened it, her breath catching as she scanned the pages. A draft of the healthcare bill, thick with legalese. But one phrase leaped out. "The Harper model." Her eyes snapped to his. "This is real," he nodded, sipping his scotch. "Real as it gets. They're calling it a framework. Free care. No barriers. Scaled nationwide. Your name's on it. Emily Isibwancho. You're not just a nurse anymore. You're a blueprint." Her knees wobbled, and she sank into a chair, the folder trembling in her hands. "Nationwide," she whispered, the word tasting foreign. Too vast to hold. She'd built something from nothing, a hospital born of defiance, a network stitched together with grit, but this was a tidal wave, a shift that could drown her or carry her further than she'd ever dared to go. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice small but steady. Grayson sat across from her, his smirk softening. "No one asked to change the world. It just happens when you're too stubborn to quit." She laughed, a shaky sound, and rubbed her face. "Stubborn's one word for it." He leaned forward, his tone serious. "They'll vote next month. If it passes and it's got momentum, you'll need to be ready." This isn't just your fight anymore. It's everyone's. The drive home was quiet, the folder burning a hole in the passenger seat. She didn't turn on the radio. Didn't call Clara or Lila, just let the silence wrap around her. The city's pulse syncing with her own. Back in her apartment, she dropped onto the couch. The check for $500. €0 still untouched on the coffee table. A relic of a life she'd outgrown. She flipped through the bill again, the words blurring as her mind spun. A national model. Her model. Clinics in every state. Hospitals unshackled from profit. Lives saved because she'd said yes when everything screamed no. It was exhilarating, terrifying, too big to grasp. She fell asleep there, the folder clutched to her chest, dreams tangled with visions of a world she'd never imagined shaping. Anawam. The next morning, she woke to chaos. Her phone buzzed incessantly, texts, emails, voicemails piling up like snowdrifts. Saw the bill, congrats. From Clara, press wants an interview. From Lila, you're trending again. From an unknown number. She groaned, dragging herself to the kitchen for coffee, the weight of Grayson's words sinking deeper. This wasn't just her fight anymore. She called him as the coffee brewed, her voice hoarse. What do I do now? He chuckled, unruffled. You lead. I've got a team ready, PR. Later on this son. Logistics. We'll meet tomorrow. Rest today, you've earned it. She snorted. Rest in a. With this, but she hung up, the apartment quiet again, and let herself sit with it. For the first time in months, she didn't rush to the hospital, just sipped her coffee. The sun spilling through the window, and felt the shift. She wasn't running anymore. She was building. The meeting came fast. A whirlwind of suits and strategies in Grayson's boardroom. PR reps mapped out press tours. Lawyers dissected the bill's fine print. A logistics guru sketched expansion plans. 10 clinics by year's end. 20 the next. Emily sat at the head of the table, her scrubs a stark contrast to their polished attire, her voice cutting through the chatter. This isn't about numbers, she said, her tone firm. It's about people. We don't lose that. Yaninimun. They nodded, scribbling notes, and she felt a surge of control. Her vision. Her rules. Grayson watched from the corner, his nod subtle but approving. By the end, her head spun, but her resolve was iron. She'd lead this, not just write it. The weeks before the vote were a blur. Interviews, rallies, late nights with her team. She spoke at a community center, her voice raw as she told James's story. The crowd silent then roaring. She met with senators, her scrubs a quiet defiance, her words sharp with truth. This works because it's simple. She told them, no one dies waiting for a check to clear. Some nodded, others squirmed, but she saw the tide turning. Patients rallied too. Sophia's mother organized a march. Mr. Carter waved a sign on the news. The initiative became a symbol, a battle cry, and Emily its reluctant face. She hated the spotlight, hated the cameras, the headlines, but loved what it meant. A chance to fix what she'd broken her heart over for years. The vote came on a rainy November day. The Capitol, a fortress of tension. Emily watched from Grayson's office, the TV flickering with live coverage, her nails digging into her palms. Numbers ticked up. Yes. No. Yes. Her breath hitching with each one. Then the gavel fell. Passed the normal insurance. The room erupted. Grayson whooped, rare and unguarded, his team clapping her back. She just stared, numb, 18, then smiled, tears slipping free. We did it, she whispered, the words a lifeline. Grayson handed her a glass of champagne, his grin wide. You did it, Harper, Swacken and nodding. The Harper model's law. She took it, her hand steady, and drank, the bubbles sharp against her tongue. Outside, the rain pounded, but inside, it felt like sunlight. Winter returned. The city blanketed in white, and Emily stood before Congress again, this time to launch the model's rollout. She wore her scrubs, her stethoscope around her neck, and spoke with a fire that silenced the room. This isn't a dream, it's a promise. No one left behind. Applause thundered, and she stepped off. Grayson meeting her with a nod. Ready for the world? He asked. She smiled, fierce and sure. More than ever. Zareba Son. Back home, the initiative grew. 10 clinics became 20. Then 50, a web of care spanning states. She walked its halls, her sneakers soft against the tiles, and saw her legacy. Lives saved, rules shattered, a system reborn. She'd lost everything once, her job, her quiet life, but gained a revolution. And she'd fight for it. Always. Winter deepened. The city hushed under a thick layer of snow. And Emily Harper stood on the rooftop of her first clinic, the Emily Harper Health Initiative. Now one of dozens spanning the nation. The wind bit at her cheeks, her scrubs fluttering. But she felt only warmth, a fire kindled by years of loss and triumph. Below, Sortschriftung, the hospital glowed, a beacon of care in a world she'd helped reshape. The Harper model was law, its clinics a lifeline for millions, her name a whisper on the lips of those she'd never meet. Grayson joined her, his silver hair dusted with flakes, his voice quiet. You changed everything. Harper, she smiled, her hazel eyes bright against the night. No, we did. The city stretched before her, vast and alive. And she knew this was no end, just a beginning. She'd lost her old life to find this one, a purpose forged in defiance, and she'd carry it forward. Unwavering, forever.